My friend, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Well, not welcome back. I've never been here before.
Well, yeah. So
welcome back to the show.
This is my spaceship.
I like it.
Hell yeah, I
nice
appreciate that. So as we were chatting just before the show, you're another guy who travels.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such an eye-opening experience and perspective shifting and everything it does that most people are missing. Travel could solve a lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, recently you said you've just been to Cambodia.
Yeah, I was in Cambodia in February, and I've never been anywhere like that. Before I went there, a lot of people told me, you know, be careful, be cautious. It's not the most friendly country. They don't like Americans. And I went into it with kind of this perception of that it was going to be a place where I felt kind of, you know, out of place the whole time. But I could not have had a different experience, more of a different experience.
Just super welcomed.
Everyone was super welcoming. Everyone was very friendly. I mean, we had our van get stuck in some sand, and within a matter of minutes, there's 5 or 6 village men that walked up to us, cigarettes still hanging from their lips, didn't say a word, just helped us push the van out. And then we got on our way. And then every restaurant we went to, we were greeted with a smile. People were handing us cold towels, a cold beer. Like, they were just very welcoming as a people. And on the flip side of that, the thing about Cambodia is it's probably one of the saddest countries as far as what they've experienced with that Khmer Rouge genocide. And so we were talking earlier about, you know, ghosts and kind of like the apparition idea of them hanging around places where a lot of
mass trauma.
Yeah, just atrocities have happened. And I went to the killing fields. I went to where the Khmer Rouge killed and slaughtered babies and families, and you know, there's like 2 to 3 million estimated people died during that genocide. And I've walked through those fields, and there's like this scent of death that hangs over the ground, just like a dense fog, it feels like, and you can just smell it everywhere you go. And it was very hard to experience that. And then 2 hours later, I'm at a restaurant drinking a beer, laughing with some people.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what our brains are, capable of compartmentalizing and moving on.
But I think that was one of the most profound things about that country is it's a country of profound heartbreak, but it also is a country of like just profound humanity. Like, everyone there was so polite to us, and I became pretty good friends with our local guide who was taking us through like some of the old temples and ruins. You know, we went to like Angkor Wat. Stuff that I grew up looking at in textbooks as a kid, and to be there in person just blew my mind.
Right.
And I was talking to my guide as we were walking out of one of these temples. We were talking about life, and I was telling him I have a son. He has 5 daughters. We were just talking about parenthood stuff. And he told me, he said, you know, my only goal in life is to make sure my daughters get an education, because if they can be educated, they can have a choice of who they marry. They won't be forced to marry anyone, because apparently in Cambodia, there's still a lot of abuse. There's a lot of alcoholism, a lot of gambling. And so a lot of women get in these relationships where they're married to just total dickheads, and they have no way out.
Or arranged or bought.
Yeah, and they have no way out because they weren't educated, so they can't work. And so they're forced to marry a man just to have a place to live and eat and stuff. So he said his only goal was to make sure his daughters got educated. So he's telling me he essentially has to bribe the schools to take his daughters, because a lot of them don't take girls right now. And just to hear that level of pain in his voice, and then kind of juxtaposing that with my own life, was something I'll never forget, a conversation-wise, and kind of thinking about what I want for my son, and kind of the privilege we have here to be able to complain about the stuff we complain about and bitch about the things we bitch about. But it was a conversation I had with him the next day that really struck me. We were walking through a little village, and there was a family that was playing music for tips from tourists, and the father was missing both of his legs, and he was playing like his traditional Cambodian guitar, and I think his daughter was behind him playing like some bells, and his wife was playing like a drum, and it was really cool music. And we stopped for a minute and listened and tipped him, and he told me, he said, you know why that guy's missing his legs? It's because he stepped on a landmine out in the jungle. And so there's still a lot of mines left over from the Vietnamese War on the border there, and a lot of the poor people will go out there and try to harvest I believe it's a type of mushroom that they can sell in the market for a lot of money. So they go into the jungle, they're trying to harvest these mushrooms. A lot of them end up stepping on these landmines. That's what happened to this guy. And so in order to find those landmines, they train these giant African rats, which are able to smell undetonative explosive. And so they can take a rat and they'll put it on a leash, a long little cord, and it'll go out there and it'll smell out where the landmine is. And because the rat's not heavy enough, it won't set it off. And it'll somehow mark the mine, let them know it's there so they can dig it up and detonate it safely. And he said to me, he said, Kyle, I envy those rats. And I couldn't understand why he'd be saying that. And he said, those rats don't have to work as hard to live. Those rats don't have to work as hard to eat. And someday those rats will get to retire. And to look upon a rat with envy is something I never thought I'd hear come from another human's mouth. And that right there hit me probably harder than any conversation I've ever had. And had I listened to people and not gone to Cambodia and not taken that opportunity, I never would have had that. And I still think about him probably every day in that conversation. It's a good reset I have in my mind for whenever I'm feeling down or pissed about something. I'll replay that conversation in my head and think, damn, like I got it pretty good. And so I have his email and I've kept in touch with him since. And I'm going to try and find a way to help his family out. But that kind of travel is the kind of travel that really does change you and leave a mark on you. And I think there is a lot of people that travel now, but I think a lot of people travel just to show they travel. They travel,
that's a weird one, right?
They travel for Instagram, they travel for Reels, or they travel and they do the same thing everywhere they go. I have friends that'll travel, and I can't tell if they're in fucking Chicago or Ireland because they're doing the same shit.
Yeah.
They're going to the same bars, they're eating the same food, they're posting the same photos, they're in the same pool position. And I was like, why are you even traveling? You're not even doing anything. You're doing the same crap you could do at home.
I always felt that type of travel is like what I would call Disney. Like where it's supposed to feel like travel and adventure, but it isn't.
It's not.
You're not really off the grid. You're not really gaining new perspective and time and a place, right? Because the truth is most of the really touristy things I've done in places have still fucking been great. It's not like Lake Victoria and Banff sucks. It's not like there's a bunch of people taking photos there because it's not the raddest looking lake. It is. Yeah. But the intention of what you're there for, right? Like, are you there to get this experience and see this thing and be changed by it? Or are you there to make sure other people know that you've collected a trophy?
Yeah. And so don't get me wrong. I like that stuff. I love going to nice restaurants. I love, I love staying at nice hotels. I love staying in spas. And I'm a little bougie that way. And like when I travel, I like staying in nice places. But at the same time, the purpose I'm there is to get uncomfortable and experience something new. I don't want to leave feeling like I didn't go there for any specific purpose. But yeah, that trip to Cambodia really kind of changed. Now,
were you there the whole family or were you there?
I was just there by myself. Okay. I was working on a documentary project that came my way. So I went to Cambodia for about 8 days and I went to Paris right afterwards for 8 days, like drastically different experiences. And then I came back. But I'll probably go back to Cambodia again this fall, and I'm excited. It's one of the few places I left, and I was genuinely really sad to leave. You know, usually you travel, and after about, the week mark, you're kind of ready to be like, oh, I'm ready for something new, or you're ready to kind of get back home. You get uncomfortable enough, but I could have stayed for months.
Yeah, I've had a couple places like that really spoke well to me, and some of them have been like more an adventure trip. Where I got to do 2 weeks on the Grand Canyon with a group of friends, and that disconnect, like I don't have my phone with me for 2 weeks at all, and we're on the river, and you get into this rhythm of being on adventure where it's, you get up with the sun, point. Right? You get up with the sun, there's a little bit of breakfast, we kind of chat and have coffee and mill about, and then everyone fixes their tents, puts the shit away in the river and on for the day. Yeah. And it's lovely because there isn't any bullshit. Yeah. There isn't any of this other stuff. I didn't go in a structure for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I grew up doing that when I was a Boy Scout in Utah, but I had really good scout leaders. They were like, one of them was like an ex-military operator, and the other ones were all like big avid game hunters. And so they were really about getting out, and we'd go float the Green River for like a week at a time and do the same thing. We'd just pull our raft up and pop tents, float another mile the next day, pull the raft up and pop tents again. And that right there is, I think, the way that the human body is supposed to operate. I don't think we're supposed to have as much information being beamed into our brains as we do now.
So I don't know if I think supposed to is how I feel about it, because I don't know if we're supposed to do any of this shit, but I think we can. Yeah. Right?
It's a good way to look at it.
And it seems that technology has been a can of worms we have opened a bit unprepared for, because we can't predict the future of what comes with it. We just don't see it far enough in advance. And we're still at the dawn of this. Like, we haven't had, my grandfather didn't have an iPhone, right? Like, his entire life. Like, if he would have been born with the internet, and then I'm 3 generations of people who've always had it, I bet we're slightly better at it. But a lot of this shit's the Wild West, and we're still trying to figure out how to fucking regulate it.
You'd hope we'd be better at it by then.
Well,
the problem is we keep making up new things to fuck up.
That gets tough, man. The more that we divide, the more that we find division and want to be able to find identity in who the smaller chunk of me is, whether that dwindles down in every single accord from what I look at politically to what I think the education to what I believe about gender and sex and freedom and whatever else.
Yeah.
Instead of just being a person with ideas. But everybody wants to fit into a narrower and narrower and narrower group.
I don't know if everyone wants to as much as they feel they're forced to. I think that's...
By who?
I think just the collective society. I think there's a massive fear of being labeled a bad person. There's a massive fear of being labeled something other than you are. So that fear drives us to try and prove that we belong in a certain realm, as opposed to just allowing ourselves to be a paradox that can't really be figured out or can't be labeled.
I guess I've never understood the need for the other one. Like, I like the paradox and not being labeled. Like, that's always been what I've been wanted to be.
Yeah, and I've been the same way because I've been a writer and a creator my whole life, and I find that stuff is what makes life interesting to me. But just an example, this morning I was in the gym and I got sent a DM on Instagram from an old friend of mine we used to work together in advertising. We were both copywriters, and he sent me this new campaign they're running in New York. And we were just kind of bagging on the way the copy was written because it wasn't done. It was kind of done poorly. But there was a line in there that stood out to me where it said, it was basically a rallying cry to try and unify people in New York. And it had a line that said, individually we're ordinary, together we're extraordinary. And I wrote him back.
Oh man, that's not how that would work.
I wrote him back and I took that quote. I said, individual, we're ordinary. And I said, how fucked up is that? The fact they're trying to tell people as an individual, you suck, essentially. And that's one of the things I've been speaking out about the past few months. I feel one of the biggest losses right now in society is the loss of the individual. And it's kind of what we're talking about right now. People are either choosing to try and be put into these packaged labels, or they feel like they're being forced into those. And that's kind of like a natural segue to talk about, originally what got us talking about this podcast is that children's book I wrote. It's called William Has a Weirdo. No, William is a Weirdo. I can't even say my own book name correctly. But yeah, William is a Weirdo. It's a book about this boy who just has a bunch of these contradictory kind of likes and hobbies. And he's a weirdo. We're all weirdos in our own way. And that's fucking great. And I don't feel like that's celebrated anymore in society.
It's a fucking bummer, man. Like, I remember being a weirdo because I had my toenails painted in college. I had a chick I was dating paint my toenails. I threw well that weekend. Those added up for me. Kept them painted for almost 20 years.
And those are two vastly different things. The fact you can have your toenails painted and be like this performance athlete, and that's weirdo shit. That's cool stuff.
I also found that it worked for meeting women because it was disarming because I wasn't this fucking hyper masculine ding dong.
Yeah.
That I was more interesting.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right. That I was comfortable with. Yeah, I'm aware that you think it's faggy my toenails are painted.
But I think there's people now who take that to the extreme and do it just intentionally to try and meet women, or they do it intentionally to get attention. And I think it's different when you're performing. If you're doing that as a performance, it's not actually being weird. It's actually more or less...
Well, that's like trying to be weird, phonetically. Do you know what I mean? Like, you actually don't have any of the interest, but you know that these are all the books that the people that you're into read, and so you have those on your shelves despite you've never actually fucking read them.
Yeah, which is like everyone's decor when you look on Instagram. They all have the same goddamn Tom Ford book laying on their coffee table.
How dare
because
they?
That's just a book you put out and makes you look like you're educated and understand fashion.
You understand things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not ever even cracking a page to it.
But yeah, I think the difference between being a weirdo and being as a performer is... Are you doing the things you're doing to get attention, or are you doing the things you're doing because you actually enjoy them?
Right.
Do you actually find them to be intriguing to you, or do you do it because it makes you feel better or feel a certain way about yourself, regardless what other people are telling you?
And so along those lines, right, like, I think about whose people's heroes are as they're growing up, and however you want to define hero, this idol, mentor, and other people like that, right? And I can see how lots of people fall into the mainstream, whoever they are. And then, now looking at something as popular as the Kardashians, which they've just become a data-driven machine. Mm-hmm. That like whatever the larger part of the audience says it is, they just move toward that slowly and become whatever works for the vast majority of people. Whereas for me, it was guys like Hunter S. Thompson. It was guys like Anthony Bourdain. It was guys like David Cho currently that I'm really attracted to. Like those are the guys that really ignite me and my sense of like, holy shit, look at this person.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about Anthony Bourdain, and he was probably the first celebrity that I ever felt that sense of like kind of hero worship for. Mm-hmm. There's never been a lot of people I've looked up to like that. And I don't think I looked up to him as much as I related to him, where I felt like I had a lot in common with the way he saw the world. And I liked the way that he was always open about being like, listen, I'm fucked up. Like I'm fucked up, but I find this interesting. And I like watching his career progression where he was, he's a chef and a writer and then a TV host. And if you watch the earlier episodes, he really struggled with being a host. He didn't feel he was good at it, and he got good at it. And then he became like a journalist. When he got the next show, Parts Unknown, he took
it really op-ed
He took
style.
it very seriously, and he commented less on food and he commented more on culture. And that's when I developed just a lot of respect for him because I could see what he was trying to do, and I could see the strain it was taking on his life in general with the weight of that responsibility. And so when he killed himself, that was the first time I think I ever felt sad over someone I never met.
Yeah.
I never quite understood why people mourn someone they've never known. But that one kind of hit me just because I felt like I could see myself in him.
I have a super similar experience with it.
But like anyone else, the only other person I think whose life I found like drastically interesting in that sense was Mark Twain. And that's because I thought Mark Twain was just, he was funny, he was witty, he was super, just well-traveled. He intentionally tried to comment on things that he knew would be everlasting in the human condition, and I just thought he was a really interesting individual.
And had a lot of strange peculiarities too, right?
Yeah,
he's a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, he was a fucking weirdo. But like one of the things too about being a weirdo is how you become remembered. And I also think being a weirdo is anyone who's ever been successful is weird in their own way, and I think that's what people are missing out on now too. Is
man, I think about that a lot, right? Like everyone successful is weird.
Yeah.
And that's super true. Whether that was in athletics, like the handful of people that I knew that are world champion or like Olympic gold medalist type athletes, they're fucking weird. They have a singular level of focus that most people can't begin to even fucking grasp.
Yeah.
They're super fucking weird, high functioning mutants. And getting around those people in any craft is fascinating to see what they do. And the more now that like getting involved with more speaking gigs and doing things outside of my brand or especially outside of lifting now that that's done, it's amazing to me that part of the being extraordinary is just simply that you chose to chase dreams instead of do good enough and fall in line. Like that's enough right now to be a separator as just, you chased your dreams.
Yeah, it's enough to just do the same thing long enough that you become an expert at it, essentially. I think a lot of people quit things too early,
Yeah.
They jump to the next thing. I have friends like that where they'll jump from one thing to the next. And it's like, you understand if you would have stuck at what you were doing 5 years ago, you probably would have reached a peak of being able to support yourself there now. But because you kept hopping around, you're just going to keep hopping around. Like you can't just stick something out.
Now it's just waiting to catch fire immediately. And that's not how any of it works.
I feel pretty fortunate in the fact that I've always wanted to be a writer.
Really? Like always?
Yeah. I wanted to be a musician first. Like I thought I was going to play drums.
How far did you get in that path?
I ended up being a tour manager for a while. I toured with some major bands on the Mayhem Festival.
That's as close as I got to fucking playing instruments for a living.
But I was writing before that. I'd been writing for years before that, and I just an opportunity that came my way, and I took it. But when I was in college, I went to college in business because I was like, all right, I'm just going to learn business. I know I'm going to be an entrepreneur of some sorts. And my first semester, I had a writing course, and I got A's on all my papers, and I continued to get good grades on all my papers. And I was like, there's something to this. Like, I think I'm a pretty good writer. And so I just started enjoying it because I was seeing success in it. So I started offering to write for local papers. And I would do like the music review column, and I'd write it for free. And I was writing all this stuff for free, trying to get my name out as a writer. And I got a job in a nutrition company, and so I was writing their emails and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm making money writing. It wasn't good money. I wanted to get into advertising because I knew like if you were a copywriter, you could get paid pretty well to write.
Sure.
And so it was this in Utah, and I interviewed at every ad agency in Utah. I had a good portfolio. I knew I was good. And I had someone verbatim tell me, we can't hire you because you have your fingers tattooed.
Really?
Yeah, they said
you work behind the scenes, like you're not customer facing.
The thing about advertising though is you do pitch your work to clients, and so they told me, they said you won't present well to clients, and I was just so blown away, and I was like, that's just so fucking stupid. Like I'm good.
Yeah,
they
but
said
dude,
I'm good.
I'm 40.
I'm 36.
Okay,
so at the time it was different. So
yeah. I mean, we're both in that group that the tattoo thing now doesn't seem to make worth a fuck.
Yeah,
no one gives a shit.
If anything, they'll hire you because of it now.
Right.
But then I ended up taking a job at an outdoor company, writing emails again, and I applied to one more agency, and I met with the creative director, and I told him, I said, listen, if you don't hire me, I'm going to say fuck it, and I'm not even going to try and work in advertising anymore because none of you motherfuckers will hire me. And he thought it was so cool that I was just like that, and he's like, you're hired. He's like, I like your attitude, and I know that if I hire you, you're not gonna fuck it up. You're going to take it seriously.
Hell yeah.
So I have always been writing for work, and I had someone ask me maybe 7-8 years ago, what would you do if you weren't a writer? And I can't even answer that question. And I feel very fortunate that I can't answer that question because there's nothing, like when I picture my future and when I allow myself to daydream and I lay in bed and I think of my life 20 years from now, there is nothing that I can even like visualize that appeals to me more than being a writer. And so I feel very fortunate to have that because a lot of people, they hop around too much, they never get there.
Yeah, see, I don't have that like singular drive toward a specific.
Yeah.
I've been able now to like really chase the intention that makes me the happiest, which is creating.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make a fuck how that's done, whether that is I'm getting to write and do a book or it's I'm getting to write content that we're putting out for the brand or podcast or paint.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter as long as I'm trying to make a new thing.
Yeah, and I like creating. Like I like playing drums. I like painting. I love architecture. I think it's important to take inspiration from all forms of creativity. But as far as like a singular focus, there's nothing I'd rather do than write. I could write all day if my brain would allow me to.
What currently inspires you the most?
Probably watching my son observe the world.
Really?
Because it's unique. Because it takes me back to like my own childhood and how I thought about things. And it's just interesting to watch him observe stuff that's become very mundane to me because I've been around it for 36 years, and watching him experience the world kind of challenges the way I think. And so if I allow myself to observe him more, I think I have, I can kind of remind myself of some earlier times, which have spurred a lot of creativity for me, particularly because the book I'm working on right now for myself is like a memoir style book. So I'm going back through my own childhood and writing about basically the story of me, how I became this captain character. So right now that inspires me a lot because it's, paramount to my work. But other than that, I've always been very inspired by architecture.
Do you think with your son, do you think it's because like you're watching someone look at a thing without any preconceived?
That's exactly what it is. He's figuring things out. I can watch his little brain turning.
Yeah. That there isn't some history with it.
Yeah.
And an expectation. It's completely fresh eyes.
And that's how all children are. They're born into the world totally pure and they learn everything. They learn all this hate and all this bullshit that we're seeing adults epitomize now, and they think they're doing it because they're mature and intelligent. And really it's just a dumb form of cynicism that they think is intellectualism.
And it's bad whenever it's so programmed in that people believe it's right.
Yeah.
Like righteous and right or wrong.
Yeah, as soon as you can, use that term virtue signal. As soon as you can virtue signal your disdain for someone else, it's a slippery slope because there's no telling when it's going to stop. And we've seen that happening for years. You talked about the divisiveness earlier. It's something I'm very proud of myself for the past couple of years because when it started getting really bad in 2020. One of the first things I told my girlfriend was like, I made my name as a writer for speaking out. Like people follow me because I'm opinionated and they buy my books because I'm opinionated. And if I don't remain opinionated now, everything I've done doesn't mean anything. Because right now this is, people make that joke. COVID was an IQ test. I think it was a character test. I think a lot of people failed it. and a lot of very influential people failed it. I was really upset to see a lot of celebrities and people that I respected, fail that character test and turn on people quick.
Yeah, that part of it is pretty gross, man.
Yeah, so I tried. I told my girlfriend early on, I was like, I'm gonna choose a side here, and my side's gonna be the side of the people. I'm gonna speak the whole time about bringing people together, remaining unified, seeing things differently, and not allowing it to happen. So I'm very proud. I can look back on everything I wrote, and you look at a lot of journalists now that are backtracking on shit they wrote, and these major TV personalities backtracking. I can look back on everything I wrote from 2020 to now, and I don't regret a damn thing.
Right on.
Because everything I wrote, I feel very confident in why I wrote it, and I don't have to backtrack on shit, and I'm proud of myself for that. And I don't think enough people do things to make themselves proud these days. I think a lot of people do things to make others proud.
Oh, I think we spend a ton of time doing that.
I think too many people do. It goes back to the whole travel thing. Like, people are doing it for other people, not for themselves. And I'm just...
I mean, a good way to know that is, how few people travel by themselves or are willing to just go on the adventure without having someone to share it with?
I think more people would, but I think a lot of people just are afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has anything to do with people not wanting to do it because they have a need to be seen. I just think a lot of people are scared to do it.
Oh, I believe
the first time you step foot on foreign soil and you don't see anything in English and you're from America and you're walking through a Korean airport and you don't recognize a goddamn thing. I could see that being very intimidating. The first time I did it, I was like, wow, I felt really out of sorts. But the only way to not feel out of sorts is to go through it and it's
realize,
everything.
Do you know how many fucking millions of people have come through this airport and not perished? I bet I can fucking figure it out.
But the cool thing is you'll find everyone's human. Everyone's human and everyone's willing to help you out. I think the most polite people I ever met were these Korean flight attendants when I was flying over to for my first leg of that flight. I didn't know what the fuck they were serving me. I couldn't read a damn thing. I didn't know how to prepare the meal because it came in all these weird little containers. She sat down with me, kneeled down next to my seat, and she's like, "Do you know what you're doing?" I was like, "I have no clue." And she sat there and helped me structure it. She's like, "You mix this with this. This is what you eat with this." I've never had a flight attendant do that on a domestic flight.
No, man, things have changed a lot here, and it seems like it's been a rapid push in the last couple years, man. People are just a bit more on edge and a little bit more fuck you toward everything, especially service industry people that have been deemed to be essential workers, yet on the lowest on the fucking totem pole as it being taken care of. It's fucking tough, man, especially now traveling outside of the country more and more. I got a couple trips to Africa earlier this year, one to Uganda and one to South Africa, which South Africa's lovely. Had a great time there and would be interested in living there for a stretch. Uganda, I don't know that I want to live there, but man, it was cool. And it was a lot of what you talked about with Cambodia. Man, I don't have any problems.
Yeah, I think you actually messaged me when I was in Cambodia and you said it, because I think you went a week after. And I had posted something about my experience and you wrote and you were like, "I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to Uganda next week and I'm looking forward to having a similar experience."
Yeah, so I went with a buddy of mine, Justin Wren, and his foundation, Fight for the Forgotten. So Brant and I got a chance to go and try to help put together content for him. And since they've been putting in freshwater drinking wells throughout the Congo and then now into Uganda, western Uganda, working with the Batwa pygmy people. So 4.5 feet tall, man. They're rad.
You were the goddamn monster.
Yeah,
man.
super, super interesting to be around. But this group of people have been displaced and kicked out of their ancestral homes by government and everything else. And so this group individually that we were working with, that we had turned over this 50 acres of land to and these 30 houses, man, they had been kicked out of the forest by the Ugandan government 17 years ago and then given this 1/4 acre of land behind the slums in a town that all of
similar
is slums.
the reservation thing we did here.
Yeah, except a 1/4 acre with 2 things of raw sewage running through it.
How many people?
300.
On a 1/4 acre?
Yeah, that's what they were given. Behind the bars. And they built a couple mud brick huts, and they've got small fig-leafed huts that they're sleeping in, but the locals in the town will come in and fuck with them and rape or bloodlet or do any of that. And like they lived there for 17 years, and trying to put that in perspective that, King Zito, the guy up there, is this, he's 85. The idea that you were 60 when they moved you out of the forest. Like you have to unwork that to become a member of society to a place that doesn't have running water, doesn't have food, you don't have any job, you're not self-sustaining anymore, and watch half of your tribe go. They lost 150 people in that 17 years.
That doesn't even sound real.
Not only that, guess where they bury them? On the quarter acre.
They just put them beneath the huts? That doesn't even sound real. It's like
where else do they? That's what it would hit me with. I'm like, there's no trash service. Like no one's coming to pick up anything. There's not someone you call if there's an emergency. Like school is a 3-hour walk, and for the Batwa, they're not even often given access to the school. Yeah. They're treated like bottom of the barrel animal people. Like we've heard stories where the Batwa had to walk the 3.5 hours to the hospital with one of their carrying one of their, members, and got there, were denied service because they're dirty. And then the person died, and then the hospital kept the body and then charged them a fee. And you're talking about a group of people that like average $300 a year of income.
Yeah.
And like, man, being born in 1983 to two parents that love me in America, like it's been a fucking smooth ride.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a parent, like that breaks my heart because I know what it's like to want the best for your son or daughter, and to know that that's the world you have to bring them up in would be just incredibly heartbreaking.
That's not even, I mean, I do appreciate everything that we try to push with, accountability and pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but like that don't exist there.
Yeah, in Africa, Africa is one of those countries that is truly, I can't even think of the right word right now, but when you talk about like corruption, like Africa has it on a different level. And a lot of people are just blind to basically the crimes against humanity that happen on the daily there.
One of the hardest things I saw, right, is that like we were part of 2 celebrations. We did one where we turned over a water well to like probably 1,000 people, and some of the local bureaucrats and whatnot show up for the celebration to do the whole thing. And it's typical.
You mean the guys
speech
that could have like helped it and
done those
fuck
that
those
didn't?
Guys.
I'm 100% with you, right? And so we have a big land celebration where we're turning over this now 50 acres to the Batwa in front of, there's probably 1,000 people that have come to this thing.
50 acres?
Yeah.
So they go from a quarter to 50. How does this 50 acres get acquired for them?
So Justin, through Fight for the Forgotten, purchased it and built the homes.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So his group has done that.
That's cool.
And then they put in a well for the local community too, not just the Batwa. And so this celebration up there on the hill, right? Like all the bureaucrats are there, and like there's all this. I'm introducing the 3rd Ward, blah blah representative, right? So the Batwa don't speak English; they all speak Swahili. A couple of the teenagers and 20-year-olds will speak English to be able to translate for us, but mostly they all speak Swahili, and none of it written. And then you've got. So there's 165 or so Batwa, and then you've got locals from the Karambi area. So there's probably another 300 or 400 people there that no one speaks English except like bureaucrats and us. And they do this whole thing in English. And there's just part of me like, who the fuck is this for?
The Western cultures.
Who's this fucking celebration for? It's them. They stood there and did the whole thing in fucking English with their back turned to the Batwa. And like one of these motherfuckers says, it's just incredible to see what you've done by making the Batwa human. And then like they're first in line for fucking food at the party. And
yeah. Well, you see politicians do that similar shit here. It's just that whole mentality people get when they get into a position of power and they start to think they legitimately believe they're better than other people.
Yo, I was boiling.
Yeah, that would piss me off.
And by the end of it, the night before would have been like the smaller water well celebration, and we got back to Karambi land, and I'm staying in one of the houses that Justin's team's built. It's very small, 10 by 30 brick building, concrete floor, concrete walls, simple, pretty similar to a prison cell. best thing I've seen in anywhere we've been close. And so sleeping there, we get back and I can hear all the Batwa partying because of this water well going in. So they're celebrating with local people and all up on the mountain where their houses are.
Did you party with them?
Second night I did.
I would have been out there for sure.
So the first night I was laying in bed and listening to them party. And Justin came by and he's like, oh, you should come party, right? And I'm like, I'm good tonight. I was like, they weren't partying for me. Do you know what I mean? Like they were genuinely celebrating. Them have their
celebration.
And I felt like I was having a pretty highlight moment of life, laying there realizing these people don't have anything. Mm-hmm. But they have gangbusters worth of community and love and purpose. And they're happy. I would not describe the people that I spent time with there unhappy. And so listening to that, and I just felt like going to be part of it now interjects me into that story, and it changes it in some way in their memory or mine or all of it, and it's greedy. Yeah, I was already having the moment.
I can understand that, but I probably still would have been there at least to observe. I would have wanted to see it, just kind of sit in the shadows and observe the thing.
Now, the second night, when we had the party, the real party,
you got rowdy.
We went up there and danced and everything like that, and like
they have alcohol and stuff at these things.
So alcohol makes its way there.
Yeah, do they make like their own alcohol? Every little culture has a way of making it.
Yeah, a bit, and then you smell a little weed here and there.
Yeah.
It is for sure one of the parties I've been at that I was like, man, tab acid tonight would make this absolutely fucking wild. Dancing with this 4-foot group of pygmy people on top of a mountain in Uganda, and like they're blaring music through this one speaker they've got, and there's probably 800 or 900 people. Were they listening to
like
there.
Traditional music?
No, but it was like a pop.
They're playing like Drake and Young Dolph and shit.
No, it wasn't anything Western pop. Yeah. Like Justin tried to put something on, and you could see everyone's like, "Fuck, this is too slow."
Yeah,
like it needs fucking way more vibe to it. I got turned on when I was in Zimbabwe to this stuff called like Zamrock, which is like Zambian rock, and it's fucking great. It sounds like 70s kind of acid trippy.
That's cool
music. I can't believe it comes from that area.
So did you have a translator so you could at least like have some conversation with these people?
Yeah, so we had a translator with us. So we're there with Justin's group, right? Like, so we're working and facilitating, and so there's translators talking to us and trying to help solve problems. So once the kind of culture shock of realizing how the world is there had worn off, and seeing kids really hungry and all that, then starting to try to figure out like, how do we actually problem solve for a group of people that hasn't had education, that hasn't had access to education, that there's a lot to sort out. You can't just be like, here's land, now farm. Mm-hmm. They're a group of people that don't have a future tense in their vocabulary.
Then what's funny is that exact same thing was said to me in Cambodia. My guide was saying a lot of Cambodians don't know how to prepare for the future.
Right.
They've never been taught to think ahead, and so they don't understand how to plan and save and coordinate. Like all they've been taught is like today. And that is interesting. You said that same thing.
I mean, one of the common sayings, and we heard it a few times, and it was from the Batwa and Ugandans in general, is like, you've got to watch, but we've got the time. There's a lot of that I dug, man, that just really being present, that things operate differently over there. I mean, man, as a culture, we're very prompt for a lot of things. We're not the Japanese, but if you go to Europe, dinners take an extreme amount of time compared to here. Like, we're not prepared to sit down and do a thing. We are on to the fucking next.
Yeah, I like things lasting a long time as long as they start on time. I hate things
I agree with that.
Like my biggest pet peeve is people being late to things that are planned.
Yeah, that's tough.
But
man.
I like the American way of showing up, but I do admire the European long lunch, long dinner, spending time with friends mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder why we can't quite adopt that. Is it the hustle culture that we're now ingrained into, that time's money and you're not making any and you're sitting there wasting all day?
I think it happened. I think
lunch?
It happened way before that.
Okay.
I just think Americans just have, we have so many forms of entertainment. We've always been seeking entertainment in different forms that we just don't know how to sit with things. Like people, I think it kind of, if I had to pinpoint to something, I would think it started with like the TV dinner age, where people started combining dinner with TV. Like that became like the thing, like you eat as you watch TV. And then from then, like meals kind of lose their whole connectiveness. Like at that point, it's no longer about connecting. It's about just getting through the meal and being entertained by something.
The fucking TV is such a dangerous thing.
If you keep that going, progressing, like from that TV dinner era into where we are now, you know, you go to restaurants and you see people eating across from each other, and both of them will have a phone in front of their face and eating with the other hand.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really, that's troublesome for me, for long term of a society.
I agree. And so like I'm moving out of Miami right now. I've been in Miami for almost 2 years, and we decided that's not for us. It's not the lifestyle we want. So we were looking at homes a couple hours north, and we drove through this neighborhood that's all dirt roads because people ride their horses. It's like a planned community meant for horse ownership. And I saw two boys.
Like instead of golf carts?
Yeah. People ride their horses
Get
around.
a nag?
People have golf carts too, though. But I saw two boys, probably 8 or 9, riding those fat bikes, those fat mountain bikes, but they had fishing poles. And I was like, that's it. That's the move. This is where I want to raise my son. Because that's what I grew up doing, is riding, you know, with my buddies to the reservoir to go fishing in Utah. Yeah. And to see just kids being kids again, I hadn't seen that in a long time. And I was like, this is the environment.
Sure as shit not in cities.
And so the cool thing about that is you can have that lifestyle within 25 minutes away. There's an airport. So you can still, because I still like to travel, I like being connected. I like going out in big cities. Like I love visiting New York. I lived in New York for a couple of years. I wouldn't live there now, but I like going back. But there's just something about the lifestyle of quiet at night, not seeing your neighbors, but knowing your neighbors. Because I mean, I lived in New York in an apartment, and I had 10 other apartments on my floor. I didn't know a single person's name. But I guarantee you within a week of moving into this new house, I'm going to know both my neighbors by name. Right. But at the same time, we're not on top of each other.
So something I've thought about quite a bit, right? That like one of the things that I thought was neat with the Botwa, because you're dealing with like 160 people, and I've noticed it in places like Iceland when I traveled there, that you have these tighter communities, right? Like, because Iceland's 300,000 people, all of it. And you go, like, everyone knows their lineage back to 800. Like, there's not anonymity there. And so I think that there's some part of that, of like being able to kind of know everybody, that people become a little bit more accountable to being valuable members of society. And when you have too many people, like we end up in New York or LA in these big giant population centers, you go back to being anonymous in the crowd. There's too many.
I don't think I ever felt more alone than I did when I lived in New York. I was incredibly lonely in New York City, despite, you know, being very busy and popular, and I was always going out, but I was incredibly lonely in a city of, you know, I think it's 8.5 million people live in Manhattan now. But what you're saying, it reminds me of a lot of these studies. I think I read a book called The Comfort Crisis. I think it was that book where he talks about the human brain is only meant to carry like 150 connections.
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly what that number is, but you know what,
it's
called. But yeah, that's it. It's like 150 is the most number of like intimate relationships.
And a lot of people have been talking about that lately, saying, you know, that's like the ideal group for you to feel like you're part of something larger than yourself, but you can still maintain relationships with everyone.
Right. You know, just so happen to be pretty close to what, you know, I saw with the Botwa or, you know, 150 stuff. Yeah, about 165.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got maybe like close friends. I got maybe like 5.
Yeah, right.
But then, like my larger network I'd say people I interact with on a at least once a month, or who I consider part of my network, I guarantee it's not over 100.
No, there's no way.
And that's about. I feel pretty tapped as far as like people I can visit, check in on, people I care to check in on. Like that 100's like that's.
But I think it would operate a lot differently, right? If like that 150 people were all the people in my town, and so like awesome. One of them has to run the general store.
I think that'd be the coolest thing.
That'd be great, right?
You know, me and my girlfriend have been joking about it for a long time. You know, at some point we'd like to buy a couple hundred acres and just invite a bunch of my friends. Like, hey, listen, we'll give you a chunk of land. You just got to build your house on it. What the dream, right? To just be surrounded by your tribe. I would love to do something like that, and just, you know, the people that you want to be around. Then you build like some communal area, like almost like an HOA where you have like a pool and a bar and stuff. Everyone can come meet at in the middle. It'd be a phenomenal way to live.
Do you know Kyle Kingsbury?
No, but I like his first name.
All right, so Kyle. He works. Well, you know Aubrey.
I know Aubrey. Okay. I know of Aubrey. I mean, okay. I did his podcast. I met him. I talked to him. I wouldn't say we're friends.
Okay.
Or anything.
Kyle is a buddy of mine and worked for Aubrey for a number of years at On It, and so got to know Kyle really well.
Did you work it on it?
Didn't work on it. On it's been a sponsor for quite some time. Kyle's now was a UFC fighter and then worked it on it and is working with Fit for Service, their kind of mentor coaching, leadership type thing. And then Kyle's now working, I think they're doing like a full self-sustaining farm, like outside of Austin.
Why Austin? They should have done it somewhere cooler than that.
Well, I think they're out close enough to an airport. Same fucking rules we're all operating by. It's like we're going to have a homestead that also has modern amenities.
Just him, or he's going to have other people there?
It seems like a handful of families. And
cool.
I don't know what full degree they're doing it. But, I mean, I know that they've gotten livestock now and they're growing potatoes and sweet potatoes.
That's what we're trying to do with our new property. We're going to get, because I didn't know this, but a mini cow can give you a gallon of milk a day.
A mini cow. You get a gallon of milk.
I had no fucking idea.
That's a lot of
goddamn milk. So we got our little property. We're going to get a mini cow. We're going to get chickens. We're going to do, a nice garden because in Florida, stuff grows all year round.
Yeah.
We got fruit trees we're going to put in from day one. And we're going to try and do a very similar thing, solar panel, and just kind of set it up to be, it won't be completely self-sustaining. We don't have enough property for that. But we've got enough that, like, if shit hit the fan or if we ever, needed to kind of hunker down, or if we just want to save money on groceries, or just the reward of doing things yourself. I mean, because I grew up in Utah and we always had chickens. It was just a normal thing for me to go get chicken eggs in the morning. And my girlfriend's in LA and she never had that lifestyle. And I didn't realize how much of it's just odd that I kind of grew up that way. And there's a lot of people who just can't even wrap their head around that. And I feel very fortunate that I grew up that way. And so just to be able to,
there's something about feeling capable.
Yeah, it's just knowing you can.
Right? Whether it's simple woodworking or fucking changing out a ceiling fan or doing typical man shit, if I'm really honest, right?
It's true. It's the same reason I started hunting again recently. So I grew up in Utah. We did duck hunting. I never hunted big game, but about a year and a half ago, I was just thinking, I've never butchered an animal, and I eat a lot of meat. I love steak. I eat a lot of meat, and I just feel like I need to take more responsibility for my position in this world, and I don't want to contribute to that agricultural just
factory
bullshit.
Farming thing's a bummer.
I don't want to contribute to that, and I also just I want to eat food that I know is clean and organic, and I know I had a good life. So my girlfriend was kind of opposed to it at first because she'd never been around hunting either, and I was like, I'm going to start hunting again. So I've been hunting quite a bit recently, mostly wild boar and stuff like that, because you can get a lot of meat yield off one. Mm-hmm. And, I've butchered probably 5 at this point in the past year. And it just completely developed, food tastes better.
Yep.
Food tastes better now. And I have a whole newfound appreciation for what goes into the food I eat. And that's kind of what I've been on the past few years, is just trying to, like you said earlier, take accountability. And I feel good knowing that I don't go to the store and I don't buy a bunch of steaks anymore, and I don't buy a bunch of, prepackaged shit anymore. For the most part, I try and eat what's out of my freezer. And when it's getting low, I call some of my buddies who have land. I was like, hey, I got to come get something else. And so,
yeah.
And that capability factor of it's a big thing. I know that I can cut an animal down now, and it's something I didn't have before, and it feels, it feels barbaric. And I actually just went 2 weeks ago and I shot 3 wild boar, and I was telling someone, I feel guilty every time I kill one, but it's just part of the process. And I know if a time comes where I stop feeling guilty, I'm going to stop hunting. Because I think as long as there's still that little bit of remorse after killing something, I feel like I'm in a pretty humane place in life.
Well, does it feel guilt? Or is that shift to the appreciation?
It's remorseful for a second, because you're like, I just ended that animal's life. And it's very quick and fleeting, but I feel it for a second where I watch it go down. But I kind of like that I feel that, because it makes me feel like I'm still human enough.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people can go out and just blast things. It doesn't bother them. And I don't ever want to get to that point.
I grew up around hunting. So not around it, but I grew up hunting.
Especially in Louisiana.
Yeah. So, I did plenty of duck hunting, and then we did some deer. And
the duck hunting, the bird hunting feels completely different
totally
than large
different.
game.
Large
it's
game,
not
the same.
It's very different, because I did all the duck hunting growing up. But the large game was, when I killed my first, I started hunting wild boar because I thought it'd be easier because they're ugly. And I was like, I'm not going to feel as bad.
Pigs are super fucking smart.
Yeah, but after still the first time I shot one, I was like, fuck, man, I feel bad.
Yeah, big animals are weird. I know I've felt that way with deer. It's been years. I I never felt that way with alligators, by the way. Fuck those goddamn
It's a goddamn
monsters.
Dinosaur.
Killing
Did
alligators
you like
is great fun.
I would like to do an alligator hunt, but I want to do it where you go put the pole in.
Yeah, that's how we did it.
I want to come back and hand line it. Like, I don't want to do this shoot it off the water crap that people do. It just feels a little too cheap to me.
So we trapped for like a big landowner that we worked for. Or my dad worked a deal with this big giant landowner like J.G. Gray Estates and whatever amount of marsh they own. And so you get certain number of tags every year per acre. So we did the trapping for him. So we would trap like 175 alligators a season.
Alligator meat's good too.
I don't care for it.
You don't?
No.
I like it. Alligator sausage, I think, is delicious. But everything's good when you case it.
So hunting alligators, you're talking about like August in the marsh. Like, it's fucking hotter than the devil's nuts.
Yeah, I went wild boar hunting in July in Florida last summer.
And so when you kill alligators, they end up like throwing up after they're dead. Some things do that. And so you typically hang their head out of the front of the fucking boat and let it get all that done. And other times you just miss.
I've always seen people do that. I didn't know why that was.
Well, then they're typically bleeding too. Because
you shoot them in the head.
Yeah, I've never seen that round go through.
Not
Their
surprised.
skulls are fucking gnarly.
They're
Dinosaurs. There's just enough of that like bile-y smell when I eat alligator that I catch enough of it to, I'm good. You know, if it's deep fried enough and I'm fucking covered in remoulade, it's fine.
Fry everything. It's good though.
Yeah, like turkeys, anything.
But I think going back to accountability, a lot of people have removed themselves from that big time.
Oh,
like you see a lot of people are on this trend of like, you know, I eat vegan or eat vegetarian to save the animals without an understanding of how monocrop agriculture works.
What horse shit that is, that it's not, that it's just a death machine too.
And it just makes people feel better about their place in life. And I think more people could benefit from being uncomfortable. And I think it comes from travel, and it comes from getting your hands dirty, and it comes from doing things that require you to be accountable. And accountability it's something a lot of people just they don't want these days.
Do you think not want, like, I found a mixture of, right, I don't know how many people don't really want it as much as don't know how to take it.
I think it's both. I think people don't want it because they know how it's going to make them feel. And I think we're in this society where people are like, oh, avoid everything that makes you feel bad. If it makes you feel bad, it's not for you.
I didn't realize that's what a safe space was, by the way, until like way down the road.
Anything that makes you feel bad. And
what the fuck?
Part of life is feeling bad.
Yo, trying to avoid negative thoughts is a real losing game. Yeah. Instead of teaching people how to manage their own fucking head.
Yeah, I don't think you need to avoid anything. You need to learn to handle things.
Well, avoiding anything seems silly to me. Just, you know, based on the one thing I would say I have any expert knowledge in would be strength training.
Yeah.
Right? And the only way that works is I have to create an adaptation by giving my body a stress over a long enough time that it gets better at it.
Yeah.
So why would any of my other characteristics or abilities operate different than that? If they're not tested, why would they grow? Why would they expand? You know, if I'm not going to be uncomfortable traveling to realize I can do that, then I'll always have a barrier that says that'll be too hard.
Yeah.
You know, how do I adapt empathy? And some of that is by seeing shit that makes me realize how fucking great things are.
Yeah.
Or realizing like, oh, fuck, I get that you just don't see the thing you're struggling in. Because I've been there.
Yeah. And I see that with a lot of people. I think empathy and grace are another thing that's missing in society right now. And like you're saying, I try to remind myself often when I see people that might be lashing out or dealing with stuff, like at some point in my life, I didn't understand things the way I do now. And like, I get it. Like 10 years ago, I was that angry person.
Yeah.
I was very angry at the world, and I had a rebellious streak in me that made me like kind of say, fuck everything. And it made me see things in a very selfish light. I didn't see things in a way that allowed me to have empathy or connect with people, because I was so caught up in my own bullshit. And it's just a common theme of this whole conversation is just how the divide of the past few years has just fueled that to a point that it's a scary place out there. I mean, I was in Vegas last week with my buddy, and I'd lived in Vegas at one point in 2016, so I remember what it was like. It was always a place that had crime, but like that city's falling apart. And I was telling my friend, I was like, everyone here is very tense. Like I noticed like the stores, like I heard a lot of yelling, a a lot of horn honking, a lot of people cutting someone off. Like there was someone in the pharmacy just flipping the fuck out on someone because they butted them in line. And I told him, I was like, is it just me or is Vegas tense? And he, without even really thinking about it, he's like, oh, he's like, it's gotten bad. Like, it seems like everyone here is in a bad mood all the time. And I think that's pretty common in a lot of areas, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to see it more in population centers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it would work.
That's why I'm getting the fuck out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating, right? Like, and that feeling that you had of, when did you make the change? What was it that sparked a completely different perspective instead of kind of a more rebellious fuck everything? Because I was there too.
My relationship with my girlfriend, for sure. When we were just kind of casually seeing each other, she was visiting me in New York one time. We were at a party, and I had gone to the other room to get blown on some cocaine, and I came out, and it's very obvious I'd been in there doing drugs, and she doesn't stand for that shit at all, and she kind of ran away crying, and I chased her down trying to keep her from leaving, and she was so frustrated with me, and she's like, you know what pisses me off about you the most, Kyle, is you don't see your potential the way I see it. Like, you're putting yourself down here, and I see you up here, and I see this platform you have, and like everything you have going for you as a writer, and a lot of people would kill to be in the position you're in and have the responsibility you have, and you don't see it. And it pisses me off to see you throwing it away on dumb shit like this. And she told me, she said, you need to stop being against things and you need to start being for things. And if you start approaching the world with that mentality, there's like no stopping you. And it took me a long time to start living my life that way. But once I kind of recognized my rebellion was a lot of my motivation in life. It was like, what can I be against and how can I turn that into something to motivate myself? And once I flipped that to what can I be for instead of what can I be against, everything changed for me.
Well, I mean, everything you're talking about there, right? Like, I would have, coming from bar scene and playing with bands and doing strengths, athletic shit. Any idea of someone talking to me about like the law of attraction or manifestation, like I'd be like, oh, come on, man.
I'm all into that shit now, though.
Of course you are.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you just told me. You're right? That she's saying you're either making your life against things, which is now bringing you in the direction of negative bullshit, and surrounded by people who are also against stuff, which is just building walls and cutting down experiences and closing doors, because then people double down on, well, I was against that, so that means I now have to be against this thing too, because there's a bit of a domino to it. Whereas living in abundance and deciding to be for things and putting energy toward what you want more of instead of avoiding what you don't want are very different fucking approaches to life. And I don't know how much Joe Dispenza or any of that.
I've listened to his stuff, and I read part of his book. I can't remember why I stopped, but I started.
It's a lot. It's a fucking lot to deal with.
I think I had a lot going on at the time too. And I was like, I'm not ready for this.
No, man, Joe Dispenza is a lot to go through. But all fascinating stuff that I would have loved to have written off as kookery.
Yeah.
Years ago, until like at some point I got out of my own ass, pulled my head out of my own ass and was like, how about before, instead of having a fucking opinion on this, you do something and actually give it a go instead of just being like, this won't work.
Well, I think on that side too, a lot of people that knock it, why would you knock it? Because your life is better if you believe it's real.
It's fascinating.
Like, whether it's real or not, you should believe it is, because your life is so much more enjoyable when you have that thought. And so I think everyone just needs to believe it's real and go for it. It's not like, the problem is a lot of people think it's just kind of sitting there and visualizing things. Like, you still have to put in action. You still have to move. You have to move towards these things that you want more of in your life. You don't just sit there and they appear to you. And that's where a lot of people like to knock it. They're like, oh, it's just like some foo-foo, like you can't do that. But the idea that if you're for things, you're going to get more of that in your life is infinitely positive. There's not a single negative thing that would come from that.
No, I can't wrap my head around how there would be either.
Yeah. And so everyone just believe it. Just believe it and act that way, and your life's going to be good. You're going to treat people better. You're going to get more of what you want in your life. You're going to be happier, less stress, less anxiety. You're going to spend a lot less time pissed off, feeling like a victim of life, and it's going to benefit you. And I guarantee you things will start happening. You'll be like, I think there's something to this.
How much do you think people get stuck in, like, this core group of friends, and they can't ever transition to meeting the next group of people that support who they want to be?
It's hard to answer that, when you say put like parameters on how often. I think it's an age thing. I think it happens a lot earlier in our life. I think, particularly when you're in high school or like your early 20s, you have this idea that your friends are going to be your friends forever. And one of the things I've learned in my 30s is that friendships end, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's not to say they're bad people, but it's just time to move on. And I've always been a proponent of telling everyone to move out of their hometown. And it doesn't mean you can't return, but I've been saying this for years. Like, I think everyone should move out of their hometown. I don't think anybody should live their whole life in one city. I think it's a mistake. No matter how comfortable and successful you are, I think you should move, even if only for a couple of years. And I did that a lot in my 20s. I started moving a lot, and I've lived in like 5 or 6 different states in the last 5 or 6 years. And every time I've developed new friends, and most of my friends, like I think I have maybe 2 or 3 friends in Florida. Most of my friends all live around the country now, and we keep in touch. And there's the friends that I have maybe like a handful of friends that I've had for 10 or more years, but most of my friends are friends I've met on, I hate to use the word journey, but met on my journey as a writer, where I've kind of, melded into these different environments and societies. Most of my new friends are people I've met doing that, and those are my friends that really push me, and those are my friends that I can relate to a lot more than my older friends.
Well, you're surrounded by people doing what you're interested in doing. Like, why wouldn't that multiply that energy that you're trying to create in your life?
Yeah.
It's either that or the other energy is going to win and pull you the other direction.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. But, man, people end up in that small circle, right? Like, where you don't make new friends after your high school group, and people get married and have kids, and next thing you know, boom.
And it's hard for people. It's hard when making friends is something I think you have to continually try to do. I think, there's a lot of people in their 30s that want new friends that don't know how to make those new friends. And it's hard to give people advice on how to do that, because it's going to happen differently for a lot of people. But what I found is I just try and have conversations with people that seem to be doing the same things I'm doing in life. Like you and I, like we start talking on like Instagram, and the next thing you know, like you actually start to know quite a bit about each other, and you're comfortable, and then you end up in the same city together. So you go out to lunch, and like then you have a new friend.
Yeah, you have a new friend.
And so I've just kind of done that with my life, where a lot of people I've met through social media, or I've met through like these podcast platforms or my books, and I just keep in touch with them and talk. And then at some point, I'll make the effort to try and see them if we're ever in the same city. And it's just something that comes with age, as far as understanding that you have to put work into pretty much everything in life. And like friendships are one of those things. You have to actually work to make new friends.
Yeah, the networking thing, calling it networking is about as gross as it gets to be called. But that's what it is, right? It's relationship building with people you find you want to spend your time with.
Yeah, I like having, it's weird. I have these conversations with people that I've met in the past couple years, and I sometimes will sit and think I could never have these conversations with my friends from high school. And I still keep in touch with some of those friends. I saw one of them like 2 weeks ago, and we can talk about a lot of things, but there's just certain things that we'll just never see eye to eye on, because it comes with experience. He doesn't understand what it means to see life the way I see it, or what it means to kind of have the responsibility that I have. And he's one of my oldest friends, and I love him to death, and we're always going to be friends, but there's just certain things we're always going to have different.
But also, how could he?
Yeah.
Yeah, how could he have any grasp of what that life is, right? Like, even anyone who's in the life creating for a living has at least a taste of it. Like, if you're paying your own bills, making shit, it's a little indifferent of how much you're paying your bills. Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of gets the game. And as someone who's just the 9-to-5er who goes to the place and comes home every day and it's a job, and no, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah. But even like my family, there's just a lot of things I know they'll never understand about my life. And I find our conversations sometimes just feel like they hit dead ends, because it's like, I don't know where to go with this conversation now. So we kind of touched every topic we can, but
that would otherwise,
then we just kind of start reminiscing on old times and doing stuff like that. And I think that stuff serves a place. But I am very grateful that my friend groups have changed as much as they have.
Same.
And part of it's been because of my career. I mean, I was a tour manager. I've worked in advertising. I've had a lot of odd jobs. I was a security guard. Like I've done a lot of things at times. And every time I kind of met like different friends from different styles.
Man, you're living just a slightly different timeline than mine. Yeah. Like they're very, very similar.
So I met a lot of different people that way. And I'm very grateful for that. And I hope to continually make and lose friends. And I say lose, not in like a negative sense, but I hope that like some of my friends get to a point where like we don't see eye to eye anymore, because it means they grew. And if we grow apart, I'm fine with that. As long as they're growing in the direction they want to grow, I'm cool with it, man.
Yeah, as long as there's respect. And
yeah, it doesn't mean we're going to be as tight as we are, and it's not going to bother me if we part ways at some point.
Right. My friendships aren't part of the identity.
Yeah.
They're currently what's going on in my life. I'm aware that they're going to end, just like competing ended, just like high school football ended, just like college ended, just like my first career choice ended, just like at some point I bet I'm not fucking hosting a podcast anymore.
Hopefully, right?
At some point, right? Like at some point. And so one of those things I look for in my life now is that grace to be able to embrace the next chapter as it starts showing up, with the enjoyed discomfort of knowing that that's the path to go, instead of clinging so desperately to what was out of fear of losing it.
I think clinging to anything as a creator is career suicide.
Man, you just got to burn it.
I think a lot. I think you see this a lot with musicians when they can't evolve their sound, or they can't move on what maybe their one hit was, and you see their careers just kind of fall off, or they get to like a certain point of popularity and they never transcend that, because they're doing what appeased like this one group, and they just continue doing that instead of like pushing themselves as musicians. And so I think just clinging to anything, even if it's like something that's working for you at the time, it's not going to work forever if you want to have a fulfilling. It's not going to have a fulfilling career. Like my style of writing that got me really popular online in like 2014 to maybe 2017. If I was still writing that way today, I would hate what I was doing.
Sure.
Because it was a different level of maturity. It was a different way of viewing the world. And I look back on my old work and I cringe, and I like that I cringe, because it means I've moved on from it.
Well, there's a certain level of cynicism in all this, right? That like you can read back at what angry 28-year-old you feels about a thing and go, none of that's important.
Yeah, exactly. And I can laugh at it, and I can know what I was going through or feeling at the time. But I'm super grateful that I'm not that person anymore.
Now, do you look back at that? Do you look back at that guy and kind of giggle with a like, of course you were mad at that. What an individual.
I look back and I go, man, you weren't as cool as you thought you were. Quite often, like I look back at things and I was like, man, if I posted that today, I would fucking kick myself.
Man, I dove into my shit really hard. I got back from Uganda and kind of did a big check-in and kind of going through the travel, and because it was like back from Uganda and a pretty heavy emotional trip, seeing everything there, right? And then like straight to the Arnold was like the next weekend at a convention center with people very interested in strength training. Very just odd juxtaposition.
Yeah.
So getting a chance to kind of go through it, right, and journal and dig in, I would have these thoughts about Uganda and a realization about, the community and what I saw and like these things that I feel like a light bulb moment. And then this part and voice in my head just kept showing up being like, oh, 40-year-old you went to Africa and had a life-changing experience and you'd like to explain it well to people? No shit. It's like, oh, fuck. Can just see this over-predicted like, very proud of yourself for this insight you have.
Yeah, I'll write stuff sometimes, and even though it's important to me, if it feels like kind of canned or predictable, I just don't share it.
Yeah.
I just like consider that part of like the process of me working through my own experiences and thoughts. And then a lot of people, particularly, if you're intelligent, when you think on things long enough, you're going to come to similar conclusions. And I think there's a difference between people coming to similar conclusions or just coming to predictable conclusions. And, you can read like stuff that was written 2,000 years ago that has a very similar ethos or emotional pull as some of the stuff I write today. And that's just from sitting and thinking on the same emotions that humans have always dealt with. Whereas you can get online right now too, and you can look at 100 different personal development people all saying the same shit.
Yeah, everyone.
And I don't think that right there is predictable canned stuff as opposed to them, because you can just tell the way it's presented. And I think it comes down to like authenticity. You can tell if someone's speaking from a point of like they actually had that lesson or they actually believe what they're saying, or if they're speaking from a point of saying what they know works or saying what they know is going to get people to, respond.
I heard that I was at a thing and heard Ed Milet speak, and one of the things he said that I loved was, it doesn't matter whether or not you believe me. What matters is that you believe that I believe this.
I like that.
And that's really where
that's the authenticity piece.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, like all the self-help stuff, I don't care what it is. Like there isn't anyone out there who's promoting self-betterment that accountability isn't the main fucking first tool. Like it just doesn't work without that part, without you being able to say, my success and my failures are on me from here on out.
Yeah.
No one else gets to decide. That part is fucking tough for people. Mm-hmm. And then to realize that like, well, I'm doing it because of my parents' expectations.
The hardest part of taking account, to cut you off, but the hardest part of taking accountability is it comes to the level of regret that people aren't ready to face. Because once you accept the fact that you're responsible for so much of your life, you have to also accept the fact that all the bad shit you dealt with, you were partially responsible for. And so it's easier for people to just move past that and not have the accountability. Because I've said this before on a podcast, the stuff that I write that gets the most pushback is the stuff that's empowering to people, that's trying to give them motivation or let them know that they are in control of certain things they don't believe they're in control of. It gets a lot of pushback because people aren't ready to face that reality of that they perhaps have fucked up their life.
Yeah. That one's tough, right? Like the way I look at it is like there's a moment of awareness that happens when you realize that you are responsible for all of it. And perhaps before that, when you didn't realize it, the actions were kind of just at work. Mm-hmm. But once the actual self-awareness takes place, and I realize like I can make all the decisions that create action, which then will turn into whatever it is I want it to be in 10 years. Like if I want to get really good at fucking juggling, I don't have to have an emotional feeling about it. I can just juggle every day for an hour. It'll take care of itself. Like I'll win by just showing up and doing the thing despite my feeling of want.
Yeah.
And that's delayed gratification that comes with knowing the direction you really want to go.
I find accountability very liberating if you take it with the mindset of being for something as against something. To bring it back to where we were earlier, as soon as you start thinking, oh, damn, if I'm in control of this, and you start thinking positively the things you can put your power into moving forward, it becomes really fun almost to plan and visualize where your life can be, because it starts to feel really attainable once you take that accountability. And I think it comes with time, and you start seeing those little small things happen in your life, and you're like, holy shit, there is something to this. And if you continue down that path, there's nothing in your life that can truly derail you for long. Like you'll have things that'll happen that'll make you kind of feel shitty, and there's stuff that's going to happen outside of your control, but it's how quickly you can respond and get past those. But if you can just maintain that mindset of, I can change this, and it starts by changing the way you look at things. If you have the idea of being able to change whatever you want in life, it's just, it's the way to live. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, and that perspective becomes your reality, whatever you want it to be. Growing the audience that you did, being cynical and being an adult writer, I mean, writing with cursing and anything else, right? Inflammatory language, whatever you want to call it. How fun was the challenge to do a children's book and still be truthful to you?
It was the hardest thing I've written. And it wasn't because I couldn't swear and I couldn't say fuck and stuff like that. It was because I wanted to have a very tight and valuable lesson presented in a short amount of words, but also in a way that appeals to children and entertains adults at the same time. So it's towing that line of, how is this something a child can interpret, but how is this also entertaining for an adult to read? And that challenge is something I hadn't really taken on before. And it took me a hell of a lot longer than I thought to write that book. But it feels weird to say it, but I do feel like William is a Weirdo is probably my best book, even though it's like 50,000 words shorter than any of my other books. But in those little 16 spreads, I think I've infused more of my own life into that than I have in, 100 pages of another book.
Right on.
And it was hard to do, and it was very fun. And it's another thing that I'm proud of myself for doing. I think more people just need to do things they're proud of and taking on that challenge. I already have another book in the works. My father illustrated the book too, by the way, which is really cool to do that together.
That's a really great experience.
To do that with him was really fun because he's been an illustrator his whole life. He's a phenomenal artist.
So you grew up in a house with an illustrator.
My dad's always been a freelance artist. That's how he's always made his money.
Oh, that's really rad.
So I used to sit in my dad's art room and he'd throw me colored pencils and he'd sit at his desk and work on whatever he was getting paid for, listening to Led Zeppelin, and I'd sit there and scribble on a piece of paper next to him. So like I got my indoctrination into rock and also creativity through my dad in those nights.
What a really fun shaping experience,
it was a cool
right?
way to
That
grow
like,
up.
Without that,
Yeah.
I mean, how much of that light do you find on your own?
I don't know. What would also help too is my mom is an avid reader, and growing up, she would give me the option to like mow the lawn or read a book to get paid my allowance. And I almost always opted for reading books.
Oh man, I would have cut grass every day.
Oh, no way. I loved to read at that age. I thought it was so fun. Like there's summers I'd crush 30, 40 books.
It's not until kind of recently I realized that maybe I don't read great.
Yeah.
Like not quite dyslexic, but
you don't have to read good though to enjoy reading.
Sure. Yeah. I would say enough of my own ego for long enough by feeling like I'm not a good reader would lend it to be a thing that I'm not practicing, which I believe makes me not a good reader.
Yeah, if you're popcorn reading in class, they make you read out loud, that'll give you a lot of resentment almost to reading at that point. It feels
so much reading for me gets associated to textbooks and things that I didn't care for and the regular education system, whereas audiobooks for me, I can uptake information really well.
I think the important thing too with people is there's a difference between reading to read and reading to comprehend. And I think a lot of people would be like, oh, I read 12 books last year. But yeah, how many books did you actually apply, or how many books did you actually read? And I think people that brag about how many books they read, like kind of I just did earlier saying I read a bunch in the summer, like I was eating those books up though because I was reading a lot of nonfiction. Mm-hmm. No, I was reading a lot of fiction at the time, actually. I was reading a lot of like Goosebumps books and shit like that at that age. The world I could put myself into reading books like that just completely enthralled me. I didn't start reading nonfiction stuff until I was probably in like college. I think I read all novels. Like I read all the old classics by Twain and like The Invisible Man and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Count of Monte Cristo, all that stuff. Like I grew up just loving that kind of literature.
Yeah, see, I went weird for a while and I'd got really into like Edgar Allan Poe and Ray Bradbury and stuff like that. Like I enjoyed those type of things.
I haven't read much Poe, but I don't know why. It just never really appealed to me. It should.
I've super romanticized every gothy fucking weirdness of him.
Yeah, it should though because I like that kind of stuff. But I've always liked good storytelling. I like when I see a movie's like 3 hours long, I'm like, fuck yeah. Like I like a long movie because I feel like there's gonna be more story to it.
I mean, look at how amazing something like Breaking Bad is, right? Because you get this 5 years of character development that you just can't knock out in 90 minutes of film, which most films don't want anymore anyway. But yeah, character development or any of that, it's great. Yeah. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Familiar with Tarantino's newest stuff.
Phenomenal.
So he's got a novel for it.
I didn't know that.
He's got an audiobook for it that Jennifer Jason Leigh does the full voiceover work for.
I'll check that out.
It's like fucking 18 hours. It's great.
I had no idea. And he wrote the full novel?
Oh, yeah. Like the level of in-depth character development that he dives into this thing is so fucking
Did he write the
great.
novel first and the movie came? Do you know?
I think so.
That's usually how it's
done. I think
done.
so, right? Because like there's such a level of development on Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth.
Yeah.
In the book. Like covering this World War II hero and then ends up living outside of the U.S. for a number of years, just doesn't care for coming back. And so lives in France and ends up working as like a Mac or a pimp for a number of years and like does a bunch of weird shit, ends up killing a couple guys in Italy for some type of an odd job at some point, makes his way back into the U.S. and gets into stunt work some way or another. Just has been flowing through life. and it talks about he falls in love with like European cinema or foreign films. And so he's going to see Kurosawa, and he's going to see these other things that like none of his other stunt buddies are going to go fucking watch. And he's talking about in the book this, and I don't know if this is a Tarantino giving his personal take through Cliff Booth or if this is Cliff Booth's character. But he talks about how it was interesting to see the rest of the world start creating art within the ruins post-war. And what a difference that is when art starts coming through again after a rebuild. And he says, you know, the American cinema never portrayed war in any type of realistic way because we've never experienced it on our soil. And he thinks, and he, you know, had some commentary in there. He's like, you know, Americans believe that we'll be the Wild West if anyone ever comes to take their guns. And the truth is it'll be 2 weeks and they'll fucking hand them over to the authorities asking for them. And they'll do what they're told just like everyone else. And his take on that is just so fascinating to hear it like play out through Cliff Booth as this bit of a fucking wild man, and like deep in depth work that he goes into, like the relationship with him and his dog is 2 or 3 chapters worth of the book. It's great.
I'll check that out. I know that it existed, but I did enjoy that movie. I thought that movie was really well done.
Yeah, he's what a talented guy.
Yeah.
As far
I
as
heard he's doing one more movie, then he's done.
That's what he says. Yeah. Now he's talked about doing TV. He's talked about doing series.
Oh, so he's not done.
Well, he's not directing films, yeah.
Probably for the same reason that we talked about the Breaking Bad. I mean, he's a storyteller, and he probably wants 5 seasons instead of 3 hours.
I would love to watch 5 seasons of the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood characters.
Or anything. If anything he does, a streamer is going to eat up in a heartbeat. Like, if he decides he wants to do a show and a series, they're going to be fighting to get that.
And with that said, at this point, he's royalty.
Yeah.
I mean, he's fucking Quentin Tarantino. I mean, he's like one of 5 actors that we would have to acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And, man, what a cool spot to be for a fucking nerd that worked at a video store.
It's every creator's dream.
Every creator's dream.
Every creator's dream is just to get to a point where you can just do what you're passionate about and the money is secondary to what you're creating.
And all the resources, right? Yeah. That, like, not only that, no matter what story he wants to tell, he knows he can put the best people in it.
And he's not doing it for money anymore. He's doing it to do the best film he can do.
And I still love that, like, he hasn't switched over to being a really serious director where it's, you know how, like, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis movies, like, they're fucking opera movies.
I love Daniel Day-Lewis.
They're great.
He's one of my favorite actors.
But I wouldn't call those the most entertaining movies.
Yeah, There'll Be Blood is one of the most just grueling hard movies to watch. Gnarly. It's just so heavy.
That character, man, just that level of competitive drive and scarcity mindset.
So you know, it's a real guy they based it off.
Who they based that off of?
His last name's Doheny. I can't remember his first name. But
the lunatic.
They have a street named after him in L.A. And there's a Doheny Mansion, which is his actual house he built in L.A. And I think it's the house he gifted to the son in real life. Is the Doheny Mansion, which you can tour now. I went through it. It's impressive. It's incredible space. But he was a real guy.
Man, America turn of the century is a real gnarly place.
Yeah.
Man, there it is. Wild West for sure, man. People are making moves and like there's not a ton of rules.
Yeah, it's very cutthroat.
Yeah. I'm just really excited to read, the kids' book. I'm very, very pumped. I like when people make a left turn. I like when people decide to get out of their wheelhouse and try new things and be exposed.
I'll send you a copy. It's available for pre-order at williamisaweirdo.com. So if anyone listening wants to get a pre-order, and if they pre-order, they'll get a free coloring book too, which is like all the artwork in the book without the story. And you can get that immediately after you pre-order, so you can start kind of introducing your kids to the character, meeting the character yourself, and just kind of guessing where the story's going to go. But it's something that I've always wanted to do because Dr. Seuss, I've always felt was really influential in my writing, even my adult writing. If you read my stuff, I rhyme a lot. I use a lot of like emphatic pausing, and I try to match up a lot of syllables in my work because I believe it makes work entertain, but also makes it easier to retain. So it entertains you, but then you can also remember it because when you have a cadence to it, it helps you recall it in your mind. And so I've taken Dr. Seuss's work to heart in all the harshest stuff I've written. Like, it's still written in that way where if you dropped it into Dr. Seuss book, you think, oh, that actually sounds like
it works there.
It works there. So I've tried to do that for a long time. So I had the idea to write the book in 2017. I was like, I'm going to write a book about a kid who's weird. I'm going to call it William is a Weirdo. And like, I thought about it that long ago, and I just kept putting it off. But then when I have my own son.
Now, do you catch yourself like that? Are you slowly kind of still building it in your head, like in the background?
Yeah, in the background, it's probably sitting there.
Okay.
I was telling a buddy last week, if you gave me a notepad, I could probably write you 50 book ideas I have in my head right now.
Yeah. I'm same.
I have far more book ideas than I'm ever going to write. And I'm only going to do one more nonfiction as far as like my style of nonfiction. And I'm going to move to novels. That's what I've always wanted to do, is tell stories like that. So I got one more nonfiction in me.
What a wildly different process.
It's only other people. One of the things I can't stand doing is the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I hate it.
And so like my book Fucking History went through a major publisher, sold very well, and I was encouraged to write a follow-up, and I was told if you write a secondary one, it's going to sell well. And so when I came back with a children's book instead of a follow-up to that book, they were all kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was told like, this isn't going to sell because it's not your style, it's not your audience. But I could not bring myself to do the same kind of book again. It just bores the hell out of me. And just continuing to do nonfiction bores me too. I'm kind of tired of talking about my life. I'm tired of talking about other people's lives. I'm tired of writing about history. I want to create worlds and storylines, and I want to tell those stories in a way that can still be applied to your life. Like there's a lot of novels you read and they present very sound advice through these fictional characters, and that's kind of where I want to go with it. It just seems so fun to me.
I mean, the classic hero's journey is the number one way in most stories develop anyway.
So that's where I'm going.
How much is a writer? Are you familiar with 4 Agreements?
Yeah, I love that book.
Okay. How much is a writer in trying to share your tone, especially now in such a text-based communication setting? Like, how do you try to be really impeccable with your word to not have your intention misunderstood?
It's not my job to have someone understand my work. It's my job to write what I believe. Like, I understand that I read something talking about artwork that says it's not the artist's job to give the person the idea. So they're meant to just portray emotion. Like, you can interpret it, and that's why you see people argue. These art critics argue about what art means. It's the artist's job is just to create the art. And so, as far as being impeccable with your word, I just only write things I believe, I agree with. Like, if I read it and I agree with it, I'll put it out there. If someone interprets it differently and helps me see something different, I might follow up, or sometimes I'll comment back and say, oh, wow, I actually didn't see it that way. But 99% of the time, it's like, listen, I'm just going to put it out there, and you interpret it as you want, because this is what I think and this is what I believe. I try, obviously, to write in ways that people can comprehend. I think you're lazy if you don't write in ways people can comprehend. But I don't worry about it that much.
What about with as clickbaity and titles as everything else gets, to where it's all sensationalized and, you've got to get the hook in first?
I did enough of that in advertising that in my own work, I don't care to do it.
Fucking good.
Because in advertising, my whole captain persona started as a way to like write outside of advertising. So when I started doing that, I was writing just to write things that I thought were funny, or I thought were true, or I thought were entertaining. I never wrote in a way to really try and drag someone in or get them to clickbait or go through any hoops. I just wanted to write, and so that's kind of how I've always been with my work. It's like it was my escape from the advertising world. Now it's my full-time job. And I was telling this to someone last night. Like, I write stuff all the time, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, this is going to upset some people, but I believe it. And I'm going to put it out there, because that's going back to being impeccable. It's just writing what I believe and feel.
Yeah, but I never wanted to be vanilla paste either, right? Like, I've never wanted to be the thing that's for everyone, hence being weird.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Daniel Day-Lewis, he's got that quote in Gangs of New York where he says, you don't want to be lukewarm, you want to be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. And I think he's actually I think it's like a verse in the Bible he's saying at that point. But I remember hearing that and thinking, like, that's the move. You want to be hot or cold.
I dig that a lot. It's a bum that most people reach for controversy being the thing that gets them.
It's because it's easy.
It's easy.
So one of the things I've tried to do with my work, particularly the past couple of years, when I talk about how, being proud of what I've done, is I stopped trying to sensationalize, and I stopped trying to do anything that, like, I used to write stuff that I know would intentionally ruffle people's feathers. I was like, oh, I'm gonna write this because it's funny.
Yep,
I used to do that all the time, but now
Sure.
I don't like to do that. I know when things are, but that's not my intention to writing it. My intention is to communicate a truth or something I
if
believe
it's a
in.
side effect.
And I know it's going to happen because the world's like that now.
Someone's going to take this personal.
Do you say anything right now, people are going to take it personal.
Yeah.
You know, I can write anything about anything. I could write something about this water bottle and I could post it, and someone's going to find a way to be upset and say, "Why didn't
it's hard to fuck.
Why didn't you talk about his water bottle? Why are you only talking about your
Right.
water bottle?" Like, someone's going to get mad. That's just the way it is.
That's the way it is.
And that doesn't bother me. And I think if you create art with the fear of how people are going to perceive it, you're never going to create well. People ask me all the time, what's the best advice you can give someone as a writer? And I tell people, write for yourself first and foremost. Write things that you're proud of and that you believe in. Don't write for your audience. As soon as you write for an audience, you're writing with a means as opposed to just writing for the sake of wanting to communicate something. And that's the advice I give everyone. Write stuff that you're proud of and that you believe in.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that being truthful, right? But I think so many people are scared of even, like, they don't know who they are to begin even creating.
I think the vast majority of people don't know who the fuck they are.
Yeah.
Which is sad. I think a lot of people want to be told who they are because it's easier. But at the same time, they get mad when they are told who they are.
I mean, do you think that's just because we don't have any, like, adulthood moment, like, of figure the fuck, like, there isn't, like, a pull the ripcord, jump from the fucking nest any moment in our culture of, like a manhood test or, like, whatever, not manhood per se,
Right,
but
like a rite of passage kind of test, like initiation kind of thing. I think it could be that, but I largely think it is, I think social media, for me, it's a very love-hate thing. Particularly now, I have a hard time even wanting to use social media. It's kind of lost its appeal to me. But I think social media has made that victim mentality like a competition, where if you post about how hard your life is or how, you know, something happened to you, you'll get a lot of attention for it. And when you get that attention, it kind of feeds this false loop in your head telling you that it's good. Like, oh, people agree with me, so I must be doing this correctly. And so people start wanting more and more of that because those are the stories that, quote unquote, go viral, or those are the stories that get the most likes or they get the most comments. And so people start living their life with this mindset of, how can I be a victim? How can I, you know, outdo someone in my own struggles? And it's just, it's a sick way to go about your life, because at that point, all you're doing is looking for things to be negative about.
It's a real bummer, right? Especially if we go back to manifestation and where you're putting your energy. It's a dangerous road.
I think a lot of people are on that mindset right now. And I think a lot of people are just performing. I think everybody wants to be liked. I mean, it's natural to want to be liked. Everybody wants to be liked. No one wants to be hated.
Yeah, the opposite. You know, maybe not everyone wants to be liked, but no one wants to be hated.
Yeah, but a part of being yourself is accepting the fact that some people are going to genuinely hate you or dislike you. That's just part of life.
Oh, man, and building a personality that's just trying to avoid being disliked is fucking lame.
Yeah.
It doesn't stand for anything. It's not a real person.
Well, you see a lot of brands do that too now. When I worked in advertising, one of the girls I used to work with, she used to always say, you know, when we talk to clients, we'd say, if your brand was a person, would you want to have a drink at the bar with them? Like, is your brand interesting enough that people would want to talk to you? And I think a lot of brands have lost that path. And you see brands that are doing it right, like brands that have really good messaging and feels authentic to what they're doing. But then every time there's like a new month or there's some new like thing to jump on board with, every brand just kind of changes. Every brand starts sounding the same. Every brand's promoting the same, like, oh, it's this month, so now our logo's this color, or it's this month, so now our logo, you know, it resembles this. And everyone's doing that, and it's happening at this major level with corporations. It's happening at this miniature level with individuals. And it's just, it goes back to what I've been saying. The death of the individual is the biggest loss in society right now.
Yeah, that's something I really want to think about a lot more, man. That loss of the individual and what that looks like long term. And I hate that. I believe our system is kind of maximized for it, right? Because I recently started thinking about how much I believe Henry Ford has really played into what American culture became.
You know, it's funny. I just had that conversation with someone in Cambodia. Literally in Cambodia, I told someone, I said, this whole 9 to 5 thing was created by Henry Ford. You know that, right? Like, if it wasn't for Henry Ford and the assembly line, this whole idea of you work from 9 to 5, would not. It would have eventually developed, I think.
We would have developed some parameters.
But I think Henry Ford really kind of kicked that into gear.
But not only, so same idea, right? And this was something I was thinking about recently, but the Henry Ford idea of the assembly line, which is maximizing profit and maximizing each role to only do its thing, that's what we've done with our education system.
That's what we've done online too. It's maximize likes, maximize comments.
We've done it with all of it, right? Like even the food we want, like the food that we eat, even if we're talking the good shit, and that's beef and that's, having vegetables or having fresh produce or any of that, we're still growing the ones in America that are the most affordable to grow to maximize profit. Like we're not raising elk we're not raising cow because they're the most nutritious option. We're doing it because it's economically the best.
Quite often maximizing profit diminishes, the nourishment or diminishes the quality.
Why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it? Of course it does. Of course it would lower the overall quality.
That's why you got to start hunting again.
The thing you're doing, right.
It's the only way you get the good stuff.
Oh man, I grew up hunting and doing all that. I haven't got the call to do it again. I like doing outdoor shit.
I think if you eat meat, it's the most responsible thing you can do.
Oh, I eat plenty of it.
Yeah.
I work with a company, Stay Classy Meats. I've got a little skin in the game with. They're out of Montana and they single source, grass finished regenerative farming, and I dig all that. I've cleaned enough animals. I've slaughtered a cow before. I know where my sausage was fucking made.
You've done the process, which everyone
man.
needs to do at least once.
Yeah, I agree with that. When we were, I was very fucking proud, man. When we were in Uganda, we were given a goat for our turning over the water well.
Yeah. And you knew how to break it down?
Yeah. Well, not just break it down. Like, it was fucking a live goat.
Oh.
And my camera guy, Brant, said he wanted to do it. And he's like, I've never had the opportunity. I've never hunted, and I can't think of any better way to have this respect for my food and have the experience.
That's awesome. Good for him.
Yeah, it's good. It was a cool moment, man.
Good for him.
It was a cool moment for a 26-year-old to do that in Uganda with a tribe. And
that is cool.
The other funny part of that, right, was, he said it to me. And so you think like there's some type of chain of command of like, well, I'll see if that's cool. And so I asked, one of the other guys who's working with us, for Fight for the Uganda and lives there with the Batwa, and just looked at me as if somebody has to do it. Like he couldn't have given any less of a fuck about deciding to do this.
There could have been like some respect thing, like, oh, well, someone's supposed to do it and it has to be done with this knife and this way, because
none of that.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, none of that going on. This is food. This needs to be processed and put in a pot and move on with our day. This isn't a special thing that's happening today. This isn't anything new. And the idea that this guy wants to do it instead of someone else, like, they probably also can't comprehend that he's never killed a thing. Same reason whenever I got there, they were like, so how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
None. And they're like, what? You're fucking 40.
Well, their way of life too, though. I mean, you have to have kids to survive. That's how it was for a long time. Like, you need kids to work the land. You need kids to, carry on your lineage. You need kids to help around.
So going down that path, is that something we're destitute? Like, you're not destitute, but destined to with the increase in technology, right? That, like, if the essential jobs are going to be something that we can automate, because if capitalism is the biggest thing that we're chasing, which is maximizing profits, the problem to scale most of these businesses falls on people. People are the fucking problem because they don't show up on time and they don't do their job and they don't pay attention to this. And if you can eliminate all of those factors, we're going to need less people. So does that continue from, the average household in 1900 having 6 or 7 kids to being 2 to being now 1.4? I don't know how that trends over time, especially with increasing AI and everything else that's coming.
It's not something I know enough about, but I know there's like that population collapse stuff going on in China because
we're seeing it too.
They've been doing that for a long time there, and it's starting to bite them in the ass.
Yeah. You don't have enough young to take care of the old, and there's not enough money going into the system to pay for their.
But in regards to that AI stuff, I fucking hate AI.
Do you?
I'm completely anti AI.
Oh man, I think it's fascinating.
I think it dehumanizes society in a way that's
I think
unhealthy.
It can. I think it's a tool. That's all I look at it as, and also that toothpaste is out of the fucking container. I ain't never going back.
Yeah, I think they got to find a way to halt the way it's progressing as fast as it is.
What I hope could be a really fascinating turn of events, right, is it finally is this nail in the coffin for most people to believe the news sources or written by anything of importance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if we're aware that bots and everything are generating content for the sole sake of getting attention, which keeps people on a site so that ad dollars get spent, right? That it's not of an actual substance that a person wrote, that it's generating what's going to be the clickiest thing so that more eyes get stuck to it, which brings in more ad dollars.
So you think it helps people realize that a lot of it's bullshit?
I hope that it takes away whatever that filter is and makes people question everything.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the 4 agreements. The 5th agreement of that series was be skeptical.
Sure.
You know, that book's really profound. A lot of people that read that 4 agreements need to read the 5th one, because be skeptical is something that a lot of people could have benefited from the past few years. And so I agree. I do hope it does that for people. I do think it's progressing at a rate that is kind of ridiculous. And I would hate to believe that Terminator was a documentary.
No, and look, here's the rules, right? We just can't make anything that doesn't have a cord. This is all we have to do. It just can't be on battery power. We have to be able to unplug it, and then we move on with our fucking day. We just cut the grid off, and all the robots go.
I guarantee that's already been broken. The rule's already been broken. It's all living in the sky somewhere.
But with that change, I also think it's going to fucking completely alter the university system, because they're not going to be able to keep up. And so does that mean that our education system finally has to switch from this memorization, repetitive, tell me the information thing to a comprehensive?
I'd be fine with that.
Same.
I'd hope so.
That I have to verbally explain an idea to pass a test.
Yeah, I mean, I went to college, I got a degree, and I think the best thing I learned in school was time management. I don't think I learned much in school that I haven't learned in the real world to a much better standard, but it taught me time management. And I used to romanticize the idea of wanting to be a professor and wanting to go back and teach like a creative writing course. But now the idea of working in a university just sounds like absolute hell on earth.
Seems awful, right?
Yeah, it seems terrible. I would be totally fine if it overhauled some of that stuff. And from the perspective of like creators, I don't know a creator who supports it, but I agree it's going to be here. And I've taken it as a challenge to become a better writer and write in a way that can't be mimicked by a machine. Because there's always going to be a level of emotion that it can't duplicate. And I just think, okay, I got to find better ways to convey emotion that just can't be faked.
And what I think we're going to end up happening, right, is like we're going to have people that get very good at using that tool. You know, it's the same people that were pissy when DSLRs came around after film, because now I can shoot 6,000 photos instead of I have to give a shit about this photo. This is part of the technology swing.
I would just like to see people continue to bet on humanity, though, and not bet on AI. I think choosing AI over humans, I think, is just choosing a robot over yourself, essentially.
See, but I don't know. I guess I don't look at it as a choosing over. Like, I look at it as a tool that we've created to benefit us. How we choose to use that tool, like the cell phone or like alcohol or whatever else out there, I don't believe AI doesn't have motive. It doesn't give a shit.
It doesn't, but the people choosing to use it sure do.
Sure.
I think if you're planning to implement AI for the sake of cutting costs, I think I can totally understand the business side of it, but there's a level of, if I was in that position, I couldn't do it, because I think humans and making less money are more important to me than making more money and putting people out of work. And that's I would
on
always,
the individual basis.
I would always bet on humanity over that.
Yeah, on the individual basis,
me.
I fully back. But if I look at Western culture, and especially the U.S., which everything is maximized profit,
and it's going to go that way. You already seen that go. You already seen that happen. I mean, that's the whole screenwriter strike is based on AI kind of shit. You know, people wanting more money because they know that studios are going to start using that for storylines.
Yeah, they absolutely will.
It's hard to predict because it's scaling so quickly. It's also something that I'm not like an expert in. I'm not like some tech nerd kind of guy. I've never been really into techie stuff. Like, I don't really understand crypto and that kind of stuff either.
The only thing I look at it as, right, is whatever we're seeing with AI right now, and some of it's pretty fucking impressive. Like what Midjourney and everything else can do as far as...
I don't even know what
So Midjourney is like the art one. The capabilities it has are fucking unbelievable. And so I'd watched a video tutorial where a guy's using ChatGPT And so essentially taking ChatGPT and saying, I'm going to explain to you Midjourney. Let me know when you are ready for information. And it says read. And so then he gives it like the fact page from Midjourney of like how prompts work and how it learns information and everything else. So it now understands how to speak Midjourney.
So he teaches ChatGPT to use the other one?
So then he can say, can you give me a prompt to accomplish X, Y, and Z now that he has taught ChatGPT how to prompt Midjourney. And what it spits out is like what model of camera, what model of lens, what focal length, what everything else, and then pulls up and then gives them 4 images within a couple minutes. It's incredible. It's going to really be tough for concept artists.
I think it's fascinating, but I don't think it's art.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's art. I think the critical element of true art is just it's soul, it's emotion, it's humans. I think it's a cool picture, but I wouldn't consider it art. I would never go to a gallery of AI art.
Sure.
I would never purchase AI art. I would never use it in.
I mean, also, I'm not buying NFTs either. So
yeah, it's the same kind of thing to me. I don't. It's one of those things I don't understand that stuff. I do buy real art though. I love real art.
Same.
I love seeing actual art and real architecture. Yeah, I agree. It's here to stay. I don't have to like it.
No. And I guess what I'm looking at it too is like what level of it we're seeing currently, and realizing that this is essentially the Atari. Like, this is not the PS5 and fucking iPhone 12 version of this technology.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, it definitely is.
We're not even fucking close.
Yeah.
We have no concept of what it'll be because, the video and then 3D AI will be soon to follow. Do you ever see the case where they had the two AI computers start talking to each other?
I've heard about it roughly.
I'll fuck it up, but created two to interact with each other, and within a couple minutes, like, they were speaking a different, like, had created a language and a dialogue.
Damn.
And then just like they just unplug them and don't look at them anymore.
I mean, I saw that thing recently where this artist entered that photo competition, and I think it was in Germany, and he won, and he got on stage and accepted the award and said, I created this with AI, and I just wanted to do it to prove a point that you guys aren't ready for this.
Yeah.
You don't know how to differentiate real from fake. And it's like this really emotional image of like an aging mother and her daughter or something like that.
And none of it's real.
He did it all in AI, and he won like this prestigious photography competition with it.
Fuck.
It was just a couple months ago.
Do you think the whole thing was a planned ballsy move, or like he entered a thing and then it went well, and he's like, only way
planned ballsy
to
move.
not look like an asshole is
planned ballsy move. I think he did it just hoping it would win so he could prove a point, and I consider that guy somewhat of like kind of a hero.
Fuck yeah, dude.
For taking that world stage and making that comment. I think more people need to take that
route.
I
mean, look, years ago, right? Elon spoke to Congress and was telling them that this is shit we should probably get a look on. And big surprise, our group of octogenarians up there didn't think it's much of a thing to look at.
Well, people are going to do their thing with AI, and I'm going to do my thing on my land with my mini cows. That's just going to be life.
Yeah, like both.
I'm going to do what makes me happy, and it's not AI.
Yeah, right. But what if you had a program that then allow you to say 3D input the layout of your land, and then you could type in what's the most effective place for these crops to grow based on sunlight, based on the land angle they're at. You wouldn't use it.
No, I'd rather hand draw something that I think is prettier to look at.
Sure.
I'd rather design my place in a way that I think is more interesting to me, and I'd rather...
But would you take the input?
No.
As far as sun angle and any of this for drainage?
It's just not me.
Right
on.
on.
I've never been into that stuff. Like, I don't have the latest phone. I don't get the latest TV. Like, I've never been a really tech-driven person. Like, I'm very slow to adopt things.
Yeah.
It's not something that I find interest in.
I dig tools, and especially if I think they're not going to go away, then I should probably at least familiarize myself.
Yeah, I had a director buddy of mine just last week say, "Hey, have you fucked with this AI stuff?" And I said, "No, I don't care about it." He said, "Well, you probably should to know what's out there." And I was like, "Honestly, I don't care. I'm going to keep writing the way I write and saying what I want to say, and I don't care what the fuck AI does."
Well, and I don't think one would have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
I do think it's a fascinating thing that Gonna be real interesting what we decide to do with it as a society.
I'll be an observer.
Yeah, like individually, what people choose to do.
I haven't even downloaded any of the programs. I've never felt the need to get in and see what they do. Like my friends, like, oh, you got to get in, just try it. I've never, nothing about it appeals to me because it just feels fake, and I don't like fake in any form.
Sure,
it's just not my thing.
Yeah, right on.
But hey, if people find a way to do some cool stuff, they're good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to see what it does with weird engineering shit. Like being able to make stuff look more... I mean, between that and then now 3D printing technology and anything else to be able to make stuffs and forms.
Make more of the modern ugly shit that we have out there?
Depends on what they're making.
It's all modern ugly if it's made that way.
Modern and ugly.
The problem is we need more spiral staircases. We need more gargoyles. Like we need more Gothic spires. We don't need more of this human storage. And these that's what it is. Like apartment buildings these days are human storage.
Dude, I think about that all the time, especially being in hotels where you're it's just fucking rooms that people go hang out in hours.
I hate all this stuff that's being made. Like I love seeing like people make commentary on it too. I love some of these pages that are actually like, they show like what a park bench looked like 100 years ago and what a park bench looks like now. And they talk about, why the beauty is necessary. I think people need more beautiful things to look at.
What's your favorite architectural period?
I like Romanesque. I love Victorian. Like Victorian homes to me are just like the epitome of how a home should look.
Like the right spookiness and
just like 3 stories.
Addams Family-ish.
Yeah, Clarendon story windows and just like all that kind of stuff I just geek out on. Like I think that's just the coolest look. And like anytime I go into a house that has just unique touches when you can tell someone, that banister was carved for a specific reason. I love that kind of stuff. And there's it's like you're talking about maximizing profits. Like all these homes are looking the same.
Of course they are.
The same cabinets. I don't like that shit.
No, man, I fucking hate that my house looks exactly like
I have painted the walls black in 5 different rental properties. And people are always like, why are you? Because I was living in New York and LA. Like people didn't own stuff there. Like this home I got next week is the first thing I've ever purchased. I've always been renting. And I was always painting walls black, and I painted the entire ceiling black in my office in my current rental. Like I painted everything but the floor. I painted the baseboards. It's all black just to make it my own because it's a color palette. I like hanging art. I think gold frames look cooler on it. I think tapestries look better on black.
Yeah.
And I do it to all my spaces, and people are like, why do you do that? You're only going to live there for a year. It's because for that year, I want to be surrounded by things I enjoy looking at.
Before I moved my office up here, I'd painted the entire room. My office was in black with the ceiling and everything.
I just like changing things to make them my own.
And I like changing things occasionally. I like new environments. I like not feeling stale and stuff.
Yeah.
The Victorian area, that whole Addams Family-ish vibe is such a interesting time too.
Yeah, I love that stuff. You love that in the East Coast, and in Europe, obviously, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's ideally, I would like to split my time between Europe and Florida.
Where in Europe?
I'm kind of. I would really like to be in Scotland, just because I think Edinburgh is one of the most beautiful cities I've been to, and it has a lot of that kind of style. But I haven't seen enough of it to know where. But
that's where I picked up my second world championship, was outside of Edinburgh.
That place is dope.
Yeah, Edinburgh's neat. Scotland's neat.
I'd like to do like a 6 month on, 6 month off thing.
Yeah, my Bonnie and I have been talking recently about, I don't know when, but I think living outside of the U.S. is very high on my priority list.
Yeah, we're gonna do it with my son too.
Yeah, I don't know how long. I'm not anti living here. It's been great living here. However, I think Americans are interesting. I'd like more exposure to other people too.
I think the world's too big to spin it. Well, same reason why I think people should move out of their hometown. I think you should leave countries.
Yeah, I'd like to live in South Africa for a bit, man. Yeah. I really dug it down there. South Africans I met feel hardy and feel outdoorsy and feel still capable, tough fucks.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I dig that.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with Australia too, just because everything there can kill you.
Yeah,
it feels like a butterfly can land on your hand in Australia and you'll die.
Right.
That place is gnarly.
Meanwhile, this is the homicide capital of the world. Yeah, this is as dangerous as it fucking gets.
Yeah, you live in a sketchy place. It's sad. Yeah. It's sad to see what's happened here. I mean, and when I came here, like even like choosing the hotel, like I want to stay at Union Station because I know it's historical. I know the interior is pretty. The room I'm in is like an old converted like conductor's like apartment where they used to live when they ran the trains there. That kind of stuff matters to me. I don't want to stay at like a Four Seasons. I don't want to stay at a Conrad. I don't want to stay at like where the experience is going to be the same every time I go somewhere.
Right on.
So I do this. I do it with hotels. I do it with everything I can in life, really for the most part, just because. And sometimes it costs more money to experience it that way, but it's more important for me to. I want to try and contribute to keeping that stuff alive.
Yeah, man. Are you familiar with a creator? He's a YouTube creator, Van Neistat.
Mm-hmm.
He's great storyteller and has a really
I've never gotten
aesthetic.
into YouTube.
Okay.
I bet I've finished 5 YouTube videos my whole life.
I have slightly more than that.
I'm not a big YouTuber. I mean, I used to, the early days, I remember getting on YouTube and watching like music videos and stuff like that. But I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the sense that I really just like writing. I like words. I like watching a lot of movies though. I watch a lot of film because I like to see how other people interpret the world. So I think it's important to see things through other people's eyes. Kind of just based on how you might have done that differently. I think it's good as a creator to see storylines told a different way.
I've always enjoyed directors and how they get a story across. Anything recently you've seen that?
Oh, recently. I'm trying to think of something.
Did you see Everything Everywhere All at Once?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
It's wonderful.
I got to commit some time on a plane.
It's wonderful.
I'm trying to think. I watched something not too long ago. That
Now, do you do Netflix series or anything like that?
I do, but I try not to because I find them to get too distracting.
Yeah. Beef is a recent one.
That's great. That's the one with that artist you're referencing.
David Cho.
Right? Yeah.
I fucking love him.
He's in some hot water right now, though.
Is he?
Yeah, he's getting some shit for something he said on a podcast like 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh well. He doesn't seem to give much.
I don't think he cares.
He's fascinating. I just find his whole story and him and like any time he's been on a podcast fascinating.
It seems a bit contrived to me.
Does it?
It seems a bit performative. Like I'm an artist, I'm weird. It's how it feels to me. It doesn't feel as authentic as I'd like it to feel. And maybe that's just the experiences I've seen with him, but he feels like he's faking it.
Yeah. I guess because I've followed a really long time. Like, there is some part of that, for sure. He's a fucking artist, right?
But I think he's trying to be like, ooh, look at me, I'm weird.
But, I mean, even when he first started working with Vice.
Back when Vice was cool.
Yeah.
That used to be like my goal. I used to want to be a Vice journalist.
Same, dude.
Like
they just declared bankruptcy.
I know. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I used to want to work for Vice. Like, that was the move.
Well, that would be the fucking raddest job ever.
I used to love...
Which would have been MTV at some point in the old history.
Dude, the stuff that Vice used to do and the things they were willing to talk about and the situations they put those journalists in it was ridiculous. It was so...
Yeah, Cho did Thumbs Up.
Yeah, it was so awesome.
That series on there, like Hitchhiking Across America.
I'll give him a bit more of a dive before I make too much of a take on it, but from what I've seen, it just feels fake to me.
You're also dealing with a 45-year-old guy now who is the highest paid artist in world history.
I thought Damien Hirst was.
I don't know I don't know now.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I thought Damien Hirst was like the highest paid living artist or something like that.
But either way.
Who knows? Either way.
Story,
Yeah, I know he made a chunk of change.
Yeah, ended up with that dig with Facebook.
Yeah.
But apparently had been making decent money prior to that. Like, had been doing well. It wasn't like he was broke at the point. He just ended up taking the stock instead of the $60,000. It was
a smart business decision.
Well, he was also a degenerate fucking gambler.
Yeah.
And he knew that if he had the $60,000, he's just going to go to Vegas and fucking blow it.
Well, that worked out for him then.
Right. And so, I mean, but there was some period of time where he was, high stakes gambling in Vegas with art money long before the Facebook thing.
Yeah, I just don't know enough about him.
Yeah, he's just a full-on lunatic, and I'm always just interested in people that at some point said fuck it to whatever the standard path of life is, and then it also kind of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him on like a couple series. I listened to maybe half of his Joe Rogan interview, and then I just got bored with it. It just wasn't really appealing to me, so I don't have much to say about it.
Right on. Yeah, he's a guy that I just find infinitely fascinating.
I'll check him out then.
Yeah. But dude, this has been killer.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, man. It's always good to hang out. Let's go get some lunch. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.